Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. When I first met Claire, she was everything I thought I'd been searching for. Intelligent, warm, and full of that spark that makes ordinary moments feel extraordinary. We met through a mutual friend at a small dinner gathering, and our chemistry was immediate. She laughed at my dry jokes, her eyes lighting up every time she smiled. I remember thinking that she was the kind of woman I could build a future with, someone who would make even the quiet days feel alive. We started dating not long after that night. In the early months, everything between us seemed effortless. We shared late-night talks about our dreams, walked hand in hand through rainy streets, and spent weekends discovering new cafes and quiet corners of the city. She made me feel like I wasn't just living but truly experiencing life again. I'd been so focused on my career for years, often missing out on small joys, but with her, I slowed down. I worked as a financial analyst, long hours, endless numbers, and high stress, but the payoff had been stability. I owned my apartment, had a solid savings account, and was careful with money. My upbringing taught me the value of hard work and responsibility. My parents struggled financially when I was young, so I learned early that security was not something to gamble with. Claire came from a different background. Her parents had lived comfortably most of her life, but few bad investments and health issues had left them struggling. When I first visited their home, I noticed the quiet tension between them. Bills stacked on the kitchen counter, a few overdue notices tucked beneath magazines. Little signs that something was off. Still, her family was kind to me. Her mother adored me instantly, often saying I was the man she'd always hoped Claire would marry. Her father was quieter, polite but distant, as if measuring whether I could provide the kind of stability his daughter deserved. A year into our relationship, I proposed. It was during a weekend getaway in the mountains, a place Claire loved because it reminded her of childhood vacations. I remember how nervous I was when I got down on one knee, how her eyes filled with tears as I asked her to marry me. She said yes, threw her arms around me, and for that brief moment, the world felt perfect. But after the engagement, things began to shift. Subtly at first, Claire started talking more about money, not ours specifically, but her parents. She'd mentioned how worried she was about them losing their house, or how stressed her mother had been about the mortgage payments. I empathized, of course. Family means everything to me, and I could see how much it weighed on her. One night, over dinner, she sighed and said, "It's just so unfair. They worked so hard their whole lives, and now they might lose everything. If only they had someone who could help them get back on their feet." I nodded, trying to comfort her. "I'm sure things will turn around. Maybe they can refinance or sell some assets. It's tough, but there's always a way." She gave me a small smile, but there was something behind it, a flicker of frustration, maybe disappointment. I didn't think much of it at the time. A week later, she brought it up again, this time more directly. "Babe," she said one evening as we were watching TV, "can I ask you something serious?" "Of course," I said. She hesitated, then continued. "If you really love me, like truly love me, would you help my parents out? They're drowning, and it's breaking my heart." I turned toward her, confused. "What do you mean, help them out?" Her eyes met mine with a certain calculated softness. "Their mortgage. They owe around $180,000. If you paid it off, it would take so much pressure off them, and off me." For a second, I thought she was joking. I actually laughed a little. Not because I meant to belittle her, but because the request sounded unreal. But she wasn't smiling. "I'm serious," she said, her tone sharp now. "You make good money, you have savings, and you love me. So, why wouldn't you want to help my family?" I sat there in silence, my mind spinning. "Claire, that's a lot of money," I finally said. "It's not about generosity or love. It's about responsibility. I can't just take on someone else's mortgage." She frowned, crossing her arms. "You talk about being responsible, but maybe you're just selfish. My parents are good people, and it's not like you'd be losing anything. You'd just be securing our future family's peace of mind." Her words hit me like a slap. Our future family's peace of mind? I thought this engagement was about building a life together, not merging financial obligations before we were even married. I tried to explain gently. Claire, I care deeply about you and your parents, but I can't and won't pay off their mortgage. That's not my place. They're adults, and it's not something I can fix by throwing money at it. Her expression turned cold. If you love me, you'd do it. Simple as that. That line hung in the air like a dagger. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water, trying to calm down. Her words kept echoing in my mind. If you love me, you'd pay for my parents' mortgage. That wasn't love. That was manipulation. The next few days were tense. She barely spoke to me, only sending short texts about wedding planning or pretending everything was fine when we were around friends. But behind closed doors, her tone was sharp, distant. It felt like something pure had been stained. Then, one evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch with a stack of papers. "What's that?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Just some financial paperwork. I talked to my parents, and they said if you co-sign on the refinance, the monthly payments would drop a lot. You wouldn't have to pay it all, just sign with them." I stared at her, stunned. She had already talked to her parents, without even asking me first. That was when something inside me shifted completely. I realized this wasn't about helping her family anymore. It was a test. She wanted to see how far she could push me, how much of myself I'd be willing to give up in the name of love. So I nodded, quietly, calmly. "Sure," I said. "Let me think about it." Her eyes brightened, assuming I was finally coming around. She kissed my cheek and went to bed, smiling, but I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat alone in the living room, the engagement ring on her finger flashing in my mind like a warning light. I thought about every conversation we'd had about money, every subtle guilt trip she'd used to steer things her way. By morning, my decision was made. When morning light filtered through the blinds, I felt like I'd aged years overnight. My mind was clear for the first time in weeks. I sat there, staring at the engagement ring box I had once opened with such excitement, and all I could feel now was disappointment. Claire came into the kitchen, humming softly, wearing one of my shirts like she often did. She kissed my cheek casually and poured herself a cup of coffee. Everything about her felt so normal, too normal, like the conversation from last night had been erased from her memory. "So," she said lightly, "did you think about what we talked about?" I looked at her, trying to read her expression. She was hopeful, not out of love, but expectation. She had convinced herself that this was just another box I needed to tick to prove my devotion. "Yes," I said quietly. Her face lit up instantly. "Really? Oh, babe, you have no idea how much this means to me. My parents will be so relieved. I knew you'd do the right thing." "The right thing?" I repeated softly. She nodded, sipping her coffee like she had already won. I took a deep breath. "Claire, do you hear yourself right now? You're talking about me taking responsibility for a debt I didn't create, for people who aren't even my family yet." Her expression hardened. "They will be your family," she snapped. "And if you truly love me, it shouldn't matter. What's yours is mine, right? Isn't that what marriage is about?" "No," I said, my tone calm but firm. "Marriage is about partnership, respect, and trust. It's not about emotional blackmail. What you're asking isn't love, it's leverage." Her lips parted slightly in shock, like she couldn't believe I'd spoken to her that way. "You're being ridiculous," she said after a moment. "It's just money. You make more than enough. Why are you acting like this is such a big deal?" I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how blind she was to what this truly meant. "It's not just money, Claire. It's what the money represents. You didn't ask me to help them. You demanded it and tied my love for you to it. That's not what love looks like." She rolled her eyes. "You always overthink everything. I'm just asking you to help my parents. Stop turning it into some moral lecture." I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. "I'm not turning it into anything. You already did, the moment you said, if you love me, you'd pay for my parents' mortgage. You turned our relationship into transaction." Silence filled the kitchen. She didn't respond. I walked to the living room, took my phone, and began typing something. She followed me, frowning. "What are you doing?" "I'm canceling the wedding plans," I said simply, my thumb hovering over the screen. Her jaw dropped. "What? You're joking, right?" "No, I'm not," I said. "I can't marry someone who measures love by the size of my bank account. I can't build a future with someone who sees me as a solution, not a partner." She started crying instantly, not the kind of tears that come from heartbreak, but the kind that come from shock and panic. "You're really going to throw everything away over this? Over money? After everything we've been through?" I looked at her, and for a moment, I felt that old ache, that flicker of love for the woman I thought she was. But it wasn't enough. "Claire, I would have done anything for you," I said softly. "I would have stood by you through anything, sickness, hardship, family trouble. But what you did wasn't asking for help. You tried to guilt me into something that wasn't my burden. You turned love into a test I could never pass." She shook her head, sobbing now. "You're making a mistake. My parents will think you're heartless." "Maybe," I said, "but I'd rather be heartless than blind." I picked up my jacket and keys, walked to the door, and paused. "I hope one day you understand what you did, not to me, but to us." Then I left. For the next few days, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from Claire. Some messages were angry, accusing me of being selfish and cruel. Others were desperate apologies, filled with promises that she didn't mean it that way, that she was just stressed about her parents. But I didn't respond. Instead, I spent that week reflecting, not just on her, but on myself. I wondered how I had missed the signs, the small red flags I had ignored, the way she makes small digs about my nice salary, or how she'd talk about our future home in neighborhoods I couldn't even afford without draining my savings. Every comment, every expectation. They had all been hints of something I didn't want to see. A few days later, her mother called me. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. "Hello," I said. "James." Her mother's voice came through, calm but weary. "I just want to say, I'm sorry for whatever happened between you and Claire. She told us some things, and I want you to know we never expected you to pay our mortgage. That was her idea, not ours." I was silent for a moment. "Thank you for telling me," I finally said. "She's heartbroken," her mother continued. "But maybe this will teach her something about what love really means. You're a good man, James. Don't lose faith in that." After we hung up, I sat there quietly for a long time. It was strange, hearing her mother admit what Claire wouldn't. It confirmed that I had made the right choice. But it also hurt to know how far things had fallen apart. 2 weeks later, I went to the jeweler to return the engagement ring. The clerk asked if I wanted to exchange it or hold on to it. I shook my head. No, some things aren't meant to be recycled. When I left the store, I felt lighter, not happy exactly, but free. Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. I focused on my work, spent time with friends, and took up hobbies I'd long abandoned. I traveled, read more, cooked for myself again, small things that reminded me I was okay on my own. Every now and then, I'd think about Claire. I wonder if she ever truly realized how wrong she had been. Not just about me, but about love itself. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But one thing I knew for sure, love isn't proven through sacrifice of self. It's built through trust, respect, and understanding. And the moment one person begins to measure love by what they can get instead of what they can give, the relationship is already doomed. I learned it the hard way, but I'm grateful I did before saying, I do. Sometimes, walking away is a sign of weakness or selfishness. Sometimes, it's the only way to protect the parts of yourself that someone else is trying to buy. And as I stood by my apartment window one evening, watching the city lights flicker below, I whispered to myself, I didn't fail at love. I just refused to pay its price.